Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today, Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
I thought maybe we'd skip a day or two and not talk about a hot spot in the world, Iran, but looks like we should make a few more comments.
Yeah.
Because if anything, important. Just since last time we talked, when they went over the amount of uranium depleted, the uranium they were holding, it was technically breaking the rules, but it wasn't a big deal because it wasn't enriched. But yesterday, the Iranians announced, not only are we going to collect all this, and they had very powerful arguments why they were on the right side of that argument. But this time, because the Europeans and America and everybody dropped out of the accord, they said not only are we going to keep larger amounts, but we're going to increase the percentage of enrichment, which is significant because even though that's not saying, well, next month we're going to have a nuclear bomb, you know, symbolically and technically they're moving in the direction of having uranium that could be someday, if it were to continue, to make a bomb. I don't think for a minute that's their goal as much as their goal is they're playing footsies with, the empire, our empire and the Europeans, and they've been pushed around, and they're trying to, the way I see it, trying to put their foot down. You just can't push us around like this. You make agreements, you break them, then you blame us for doing it. And so they're using this. Of course, it's risky business for them because they're not like the Soviet system where they can retaliate. They can retaliate and cause a lot of problems, but the forces around that region, which would include Saudi Arabia and Israel and the United States, I mean, compared to power, they have not very much, even though a lot of mischief could be caused, and it is. So I think we've moved a step closer to that. Probably the thing that I think about the most that could happen that would be one step removed from us sending in troops and airplanes would be to acquiesce to have Israel do the bombing. They did it against Iraq, in the 80s, and there was no big fuss about it.
Yeah, Iran is no Iraq, though. That would be. But, the thing about this is that this is something the U.S. isn't used to. Two can play the maximum pressure game, and Trump said, we're going to apply maximum pressure, we're going to push them around, and they said, no, we're not going to do it. And in fact, they've maneuvered themselves fairly well because I think they understand that Trump doesn't want a war. I think he understands that his presidency, his reelection, is going to be in pretty bad shape if it escalates, if American body bags start coming home from the Middle East, if our allies are in flames. He's just putting it in the laps of his Democratic opponents. So he doesn't want a war, and I think the Iranian calculation is we can keep turning this up as much as we want. The main point to make about this, though, and this is Rouhani announced yesterday, that yes, we are going to up our enrichment level. In fact, we'll do it as high as we want. And they actually, as we said yesterday, and we're not apologists, but they have every right to, we have a graphic about that enrichment, and it's really the letter of the law. It's the letter of the agreement. The other graphic, please. It's the letter of the agreement which points out I think it's Article 26, Article 36, says that the participant could treat the unresolved issue as a grounds to cease performing its commitments under this JCPOA. And that is if the other parties to the agreement break the agreement, which now the U.S. openly did, but the EU now is doing simply by their inability to get together a way to trade.
That is the big issue. Right now, survival for the Iranians depends on can they sell oil. But the position we have taken is you are going to get to the point you're not going to be able to sell 1 gallon of oil unless you do it exactly as we tell you. And so with that little episode with the tankers, the Hawk said to the president, you have to retaliate. So he had him on the verge of it. The planes were ready to go, and there was going to be some bombing and retaliation. And Trump wisely backed off. And guess what? The American people like it. And 78% of the people agreed with him that was a good move. So I would suggest to the president, changed his mind. We know that he does. But he changes it even to become softer and less hawkish, even against the Iranians. He didn't want to go.
Yeah.
So why couldn't the president, I know he could, but why couldn't we encourage him to just say, well, I'm going to put on the waivers again. You can trade with such and such country. That would be opening up the door to saying we're not going to keep going more confrontational, more anger, more threats of bombs. But all they'd have to do is say, well, we'll give some waivers to some important countries, and maybe that would cool things off a bit. Of course, if he really did what we would like, we'd just get rid of the sanctions. What are we doing this for? It's all confrontational, and it's all unnecessary. And it's amazing how we pick and choose the good guys over the bad guys. There's a lot of bad guys out there, but some are a lot worse than others. And I just haven't put the Iranians up at the top of the list. But anyway, the world seems to have done it, and it seems to be the case in the Middle East that they are the chief sponsor of terrorism.
Yeah.
Well,
where?
Where were they on 9/11 when 15 Saudis actually came to our country? But nobody really cares about that, it seems.
Seems like they're the ones fighting terrorism. They're next door in Syria. But I think what's happening, and this is not to give Trump a pass, but I think the neocons have really forced him into a box on Iran, and I think the media is holding there. Because your suggestion, I think, is the most sensible of all. Sort of a moderating thing. We'll let a couple of countries, maybe China and India, trade with them. We need India to be more friendly with us anyway. But what would happen? He would be crucified in the media. Yeah. He'd be crucified. Now, all of a sudden, the Democrats who are criticizing him for being too hawkish would themselves become hawkish. So he can't go anywhere. And what's going to happen? The Democrats are going to take huge advantage of this running for president. And you're going to see a mass exodus. If they get someone like Harris or another pretty hawkish or Biden as the nominee, you're going to see the neocons going right over to him and thumbing their nose at Trump as they leave.
It's amazing that the progressives, who are supposed to be more with us, are more hawkish than ever when you look at the presidential, except for Tulsi. She's the only one that even, comes toward us. But the rest of them are very, very much involved. But I think that is what it's describing is the strength of the deep state, how much influence they have. And, the defense. Sorry about that. The military budget. There is no defense budget except for a few other dollars. But the military budget is supported by, all of them. It's a jobs program, and the president's been honest. This is a jobs program. We have to keep these weapons going, and we have to tolerate, some of our customers a little bit, but that's not our business. So we need to do it. And, of course, part of that scenario is you have to have an enemy. And he has to really be a bad enemy. There has to be a Hitler involved.
Yeah.
And we knew that and saw that, ever since 9/11. There's always going to be a Hitler there that we can stir up the emotions.
Yeah. I mean, this world has become like an Avengers movie. You've got to have the bad guy. But you made reference to a poll earlier, and I think it just underscores how Trump is walking a tightrope on his Iran policy. It's a Harvard-Capps-Harris poll that The Hill reported, and I think The Hill's a partner in this, taken between June 26th and 29th. And the numbers are pretty astounding. 78% of voters, registered voters, active voters, said Trump calling off the strikes was the right move. That tells us that Americans do not have any appetite for war with Iran right now. 57% are against any military confrontation with Iran unless we are directly attacked by the country, which is pretty unlikely unless we keep putting drones and things into their territory. Only 38% would support another U.S. military entanglement in the region. We think that's too high, but we'll take 38. It's better than 58. And now 55% are disappointed in the way Trump is handling relations with Iran. And I'm thinking about that 55. I think it's important because I think it's probably not evenly divided, but divided between those who think he's too wimpy and too tough. Yeah. So he's getting it from both ends. He's being hung out to dry on his Iran policy.
Yeah. Tom Engelhardt, who writes very good articles on foreign policy, has a recent article out and describes every place we've been. We've been over this so much, a lot of places, 800 bases overseas, and that's where all the money's going. Has nothing to do with national defense, has to do with militarism. But he had one in the title that Zero Hedge put up is, he says, why won't why won't the media criticize interventionism?
Yeah.
Where's the complaint? And I was sort of expecting, well, maybe Tom will tell us exactly why. Well, he described why they should, but we still don't have the answer why. But I think there's a few things we could speculate on why they don't talk about it.
I think one of the big ones is the media is infiltrated by the state. Look at how many of the media talking heads are past and probably future government and military officials. So many of them, they pass themselves off as passive people like John Brennan, a known liar, Clapper, a liar, going on there and touting this. So that's probably one of the reasons, and it's really, I think it's dangerous to have that kind of thing. But actually, we talk about the media, you talk about the poll. I think the big danger here is these numbers can shift. Right now, we're feeling good and comfortable about these numbers. I think they can shift overnight. What does it take? Well, it takes a few more articles like this one we're about to put up. This is what happens, totally inaccurate. This is by an otherwise pretty sensible realist, but realists can go off the rails pretty easily. Professor Mearsheimer, Iran is rushing to build a nuclear weapon, and Trump can't stop it. I mean, and in fairness to him, I'm sure he didn't write the title, but the rest of the piece is pretty shoddy too from that perspective. But when you start going through the papers, Dr. Paul, every day and seeing that, it's going to shift those numbers and it's going to put Americans more interested in taking this country out.
Talking about the propaganda machine, the media. So often over the years when they're working on an enemy, say we know he's far from an angel, and we know that he has probably participated in killing some people. But not too long ago, the media wanted to badmouth and say he just killed so and so and so. And then they show up a week or two later
with the promotion.
And I guess Unn wins that one. He gets them, he sucks them in, and they blow it out of proportion. And then the next day he's standing beside these people. But that happens, not too infrequently. That people see this and they blame him. What about this whole thing about, just recently they said that Iran is getting ready to execute two, and they call it American spies. They might have been Iranians, and they might have been selling information, don't know the details, and from their viewpoint, maybe they deserve some punishment. Yeah. But that isn't the point as much as it isn't absolutely totally infrequent, that you'll hear stories like this. I mean, when I read that, my first thing is, boy, I tell you what, these guys might be a lot worse than I thought. But I ended up with, I don't know whether this is true. I don't know what it means. We don't know the background, and it looks like the headline is enough to just stir up animosity to hate more. But nobody talks of, when will we see a headline, U.S. government, tortures American journalists to the point of near death. And there's so many things that we have done. And that was one of the things that Engelhardt was pointing out, all the things that we have done, but never covered by the media.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all of this, Dr. Paul, makes the case, all of Trump's Iran policy makes the case for them to actually try to get a bomb, because maybe they'd finally be left alone. But, the Iran issue is going to be on the top of the stage for weeks, for months, for years to come, unless we start a war right away. But I thought I would take this opportunity. We're heading into a long weekend to make a little bit of an announcement about our conference. We've sold, twice as many tickets in the amount of time we've had for sale than we have in the past. So there's a lot more interest, and we haven't even announced anyone. But I would like to announce someone who's going to join us, and that's because it's a good friend of yours, I know, and a former colleague of yours, someone who I admire and esteem, and someone who actually sits on the board of the Ron Paul Institute. And that's David Stockman is going to be speaking. He wrote a terrific piece on Iran that you can find in the archives of the Ron Paul Institute a few days ago. He's, I think, one of the most prolific writers, a great talker, very entertaining to listen to. Former high-ranking Reagan administration official, U.S. House of Representatives, incredibly successful investment banker, and just a delight to be around. So we're really excited that David Stockman, and we have quite a few others that we're going to announce slowly, but Mr. Stockman's going to be with us.
Good. We need to get people there signed up because there aren't all that many seats.
No.
But, back to this issue of who has a nuclear weapon and how does it benefit. When Libya gave up their nuclear weapons. Gaddafi died over this. But Pakistan has a nuclear weapon, and India has a nuclear weapon. And we haven't heard many threats between these two countries. United States and Russia, Soviet Union, had hundreds, if not thousands, of nuclear weapons. We still do. So the weapon itself is very important, very, very dangerous. But it's sort of like conservatives have always argued, it's not the weapon that kills, it's the people that kills, criminals kill. So it's policy that counts. But in this case, we have, this is not a statement that give weapons to everybody and nobody will attack anybody. I want less weapons for everybody. I don't think we need as many as we have. We can defend ourselves with a lot less. And I don't think that we have to worry about a system like the Soviet system have, missiles and nukes in Cuba. It's not quite like that. So this weapon argument is important. But it isn't the reason to go to war because somebody says, you know what, we're thinking about doing this, building a nuclear weapons. You have us surrounded. There's probably 200 nuclear bombs surrounding Iran that could reach Iran in no time at all. So we ought to at least be able to have something to retaliate. People should at least recognize this. If they don't and just say, no, we're going to push your nose in the sand and we're going to stomp on you. We're going to starve your children and take the medications away from them. And we're going to do all these things and not let you have $1 of income. And that doesn't play well. And weapons then almost becomes insignificant. Yesterday I mentioned a story about interviewing, somebody interviewed a Iranian who did not like the Iranian government. He wanted to do anything he could to get rid of that government, except he would not accept a regime change by our CIA and Americans. He said, if that happens, if we do attack, he says, I will fight for our country, but I will not. I will not go looking for a fight. He would do it. In other words, the incentive for people to really get energized to use violence, that becomes more important than who owns how many weapons. And just think. When's the last time we've heard a whole lot of concern about a nuclear exchange between Pakistan and India? Does that mean that they love each other? No, it has served to neutralize things. And probably we might have to admit that things were generally neutralized at the two great powers during the Cold War. Since they both had nukes, it might have turned out to be better than if only one side had to have the nukes. But that's postulation. But anyway, all this can be solved if we start and set an example by showing the world what a non-interventionist foreign policy is like, because I think that would give an incentive for people to reduce the number of weapons they have. It certainly would permit us to have a lot less weapons and that we don't have to support the military-industrial complex. So we go to this pretense we need it for defense, but then it really ends up as a jobs program and a profit program and controlled by the deep state. So we have to sort all that out, and I don't think it's that difficult. People just have to give up this notion that we have to be the policemen of the world. I don't believe we need to be. I believe us pretending to be has been harmful to our national defense. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.